I went to Milton High, and I rode the bus, and it was a long route, and it was often pretty cold in the bus because the old buses didn't have very good heaters in them. So
Was it a full size bus like what you see today?
yeah, it was a
That long?
full. It was a different style of bus. You know, it had a cab in the front style more like that than it did just a square box. You know, like the buses are now. They're kind of square, or they're kind of chopped off in the front.
Mm-hmm.
But that you had kind of a cab up there, but it was cold on those buses in the wintertime. You know, and being it's winter right now, you think about, ooh, it's cold, right?
So,
So
where was the high school then?
it was in Milton, and it was between the two towns. Milton used to be separated into two communities, Milton and Milton Junction, and so the name of the high school was Milton Union because it was a union of the two cities, as far as it was one school, two towns, and they were separate towns with separate governments and everything. But that changed in later years. But during that time, it was like that.
So was the high school on Madison?
It was on Madison Avenue.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where the middle school is now?
Yeah, where the middle school is now. They tore the old high school down, and interesting, an interesting point in history is my mother went to that same high school, and she I think it was had something to do. Her class had something to do with in building the new high school. I don't know. I don't remember all the details, so I'm probably going to get them wrong. And but that was where I went. I started in 19. Well, I graduated in '52, so I must have started in 1949, maybe. 50, 51, yeah, probably 1949 I started high school. My sister went there too, and she graduated ahead of me. So I came, and my freshman year was just kind of normal. I mean, you just normal activity. But one thing I started right after I got into high school was started recognizing that because I went home after school right away on the bus, I was taking care of the cattle at home because my dad wasn't in very good health, and so I milked the cows and took care of the cows in the morning and took care of them at night. So I wanted to play football, but I couldn't do it because I had to get home and take care of the chores. So I just had to give that up. But then I thought, well, I'm going to see how much of going to high school. I thought my philosophy was when I went to high school, if I got to be here, if I got to do this, I want to get out of school all school has to offer. So I entered into an awful lot of daytime activities. I didn't sing in the choir my first year, but I did in my second year. And I entered into public speaking, and I entered into the photography club, and worked with the Crimson Flash was the name of our school paper, and so I worked a little on that, and helped out. So I mean, it was a situation where I did what I could while I was in school.
What were your favorite classes?
Well, actually, this is going to sound strange, but one of my favorite classes was English. I was just, I felt like a nerd in some respects because so many of the kids hated English. They hated parts of speech and all that stuff, and I kind of just got into that. And I didn't like math too much, even though after I graduated from school and got out into the business world, I was math all the time. But I just didn't like it. I didn't like algebra. I took algebra in my second year. Didn't like that. Didn't get very good marks in it either, because I just thought, what a waste of time trying to figure out all these different equations that you'll never use. I was always of the opinion that when you go to school, they ought to teach you something that you're going to use when you get out. And I didn't figure I was ever going to use algebra for anything.
Yeah.
I just thought, boy, it's a necessary evil. But I did like English. I wasn't too crazy about history, although it was okay. You know, I like science and that kind of thing. But those were kind of my favorite classes. And when I can't remember, it was about the middle of my sophomore year. I went and started singing in the choir, and it was in the same hour as gym, so I didn't take gym, but I told the coach, I said, you know, when I get up in the morning and go out, and when I get up at 4:30 or so to go out and get the cows milked and the barns cleaned and all the chores done, and then come home at night and go through the same routine, I said, you know, for me to need gymnastic activities, I'm getting a pretty active life.
Yeah.
I'm getting lots of exercise.
Probably
so,
more than
yeah,
what you get in the class.
Yeah, and so they let me out of gym because choir and gym were in the same hour, and I really liked choir, and I could sing. And the choir director was funny. The lady that directed, her name was Hazel Olson, and I just went down. I said, I'd like to try out for choir, and I'm in the middle of the year now. I'm not at the first of the year. I'm already close to the second semester in my sophomore year. I think that's when I started. And she said, well, come on down, we'll try you out. When she heard me sing, she says, oh my word, I'm going to get you in the choir. And she said, I'm going to work to get you there. Because it was, I'm going to let this chair down just a little bit. It was really, you know, she was really a very good student. She went to, you need to change that
I'm
now?
just going to tilt it a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. But I figured, I can't remember the school she graduated from, but she was really a good teacher. So I sang in the choir all 4 years, and we used to travel with the choir, and I sang solos, and we'd go to various schools, and I'd sing solos. And then I got involved with singing with the FFA, the Future Farmers of America organization. I was active in that, and it was interesting. Lee and I stood beside each other in the FFA quartet. We sang in the quartet together. Now that's your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And
so the FFA had its own singing group?
It had its own singing group, and we had an FFA quartet, and we sang. And then I was in public speaking through the FFA, and I took extemporaneous speaking, and so I was pretty involved in the daytime activities. I didn't have much time in my study hall because I was out studying for extemporaneous speaking. But that, I think, of all the things that I gained from going to high school, that training that I got as an extemporaneous speaker was the best training I got, bar any of the classes. You know, I took ag class, and you know, we learned a lot in ag class about the different sciences of fertilizers and all that stuff, and animal husbandry and all that. But the real thing was, for me, is that extemporaneous speaking, and the way it worked, just for somebody that doesn't know, 1 hour before you spoke, they would give you a list of topics that you could speak on. You could pick out one, and then they would give you magazines and periodicals and stuff that had articles pertaining to that topic. Then you had 1 hour to prepare a 7-minute speech, and you had to speak for 7 minutes, and you couldn't go over any more than 30 seconds, and you couldn't stop ahead of any more than 30 seconds. So you had to go a 7-minute speech, had to have 3 parts to it, and then at the end, you would speak to a group of judges that would be judging you on your ability to do it. Well, then at the end, what would happen would be the judges would ask you two questions, and it could be different judges, of course, because there were 4 or 5 judges that were judging when you did extemporaneous speaking as in a contest-oriented style, you know. And they'd give you 2 questions on the subject, and you had to answer the questions in 2 minutes, and you couldn't go over any more than 30 seconds either way. I mean, you couldn't stop any more than a minute and a half, and you couldn't go 2.5 minutes. You had to answer the question in 2 minutes. So that really sharpens you up and really makes you think, you know, and get prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And my professor that worked with me, he wouldn't allow me to have any notes. Some of the kids had little cards, you know, that they would make out with their points on, and then they would use those. And he said, "No, you don't speak. That's not public speaking." He says, "You have to speak without any notes, and you have to remember everything." Well, that's pretty challenging, but I got pretty good at it. I went to state a couple of times, I think. In my junior year, I didn't win the state, but I went to state. They had a regional contest, and then they had a sectional contest, and then they had a state contest, kind of like sports nowadays. They have regional, sectionals, and state. Well, they did that in public speaking, and so I went. I think I got to state twice, in my junior and senior year, but that was you know, when I came out, ultimately when I went into the financial services business, boy, that was one thing that really helped, because it extends your vocabulary. You learn a lot of words that you didn't know before and what the meaning of them is. And
so when you got a topic, did you sit down with an encyclopedia and look stuff up on the topic, or how did you research it?
Well, they gave you research material.
Oh, you got
You
material
picked.
with it?
They had all kinds of research, like U.S. News and World Report and Time Magazine and different periodicals. It was usually, the subject matter was like same thing as they have today. Should we have you know, health insurance, government controlled health insurance? I mean, socialized medicine, and I mean, it was just a topic on, and you might pick what should our relations be with Germany, or what should our relations be with Japan, or Asia, or I mean, it was worldwide subject matter. And then they would give you could pick out, they'd give you magazines, and you could pick out from those magazines or periodicals or the encyclopedia or whatever, you know, that if you wanted to learn about a country, you could look it up in the encyclopedia. They'd give you all the background, but you only had 1 hour to prepare that logical presentation, and that hour goes by pretty fast when you're trying to put together a 7-minute speech. And so, but it was really mind stretching for me. You know, I of all the things I got out of high school, I think that was the most valuable to me.
Talking about the choirs, what type of songs did you guys sing in the choirs?
Well, we sang a lot that they don't sing anymore.
Were they current hits back then?
No,
or?
no. They're mostly religious songs. I mean, mostly religious songs and deep, I don't know how, classics, you know, the classical songs and religious songs like, we sang Go Down Moses, and we sang a lot of songs that wouldn't be permitted in the school today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I can't think of songs, but there's a lot of hymns that are in the hymnal now that we sang. In fact, when they play one of those, I just come right, because I always sang bass, and that was my position in choir, and so it's just natural for me to sing bass on songs, and you know, we sang a lot of carols at Christmas time. It was the allowance of the Christian element into schools was a lot stronger when I went to school. It was just a natural thing, and nobody complained about it, of course, and everybody thought it was fine. And we sang some great songs, but we sang some fun songs too, and light-hearted songs, and we sang the light-hearted Christmas carols and that kind of thing. But our choir was really good. We went to state, I don't know, with our choir. This Hazel Olson, the choir director, she was really good, and so she really whipped us into shape. And she was, I forget the school she came out of. It was over in Minnesota, a very famous school for creating singers. Can't think of the name of it. Maybe I will before I'm done.
Was it the Milton Redmen back then?
No, it was no, it wasn't the Red Man. It was what were they called? Boy, oh boy, that's awful. Can't remember what the name of our team was. It wasn't the Red Men. What was it? What is it now? The Red Hawks?
Red Hawks.
Well, maybe it was the Red Man. I guess it was the Red Man, come to think about it. Yeah, because they had to change it because that was not appropriate as far as the public was concerned. Some people in the public didn't like the Red Man connotation, but it was, it had we had an Indian extraction. We had, I think, an Indian chief with a headband and the feathers and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And you've seen that too.
Yeah.
When you went to school. So it was just different then, There wasn't this there wasn't picking of a part of every appropriate, to be politically correct in those days was the last thing on the people's minds. Get how to get to school. And in my junior year, I started driving to school. I rode the bus for 2 years, and then I started driving to school because I got my own car, bought my own car, and paid for it. I told my dad that I was either going to quit milking cows or get a car because I just couldn't get on the bus an hour. I had to be up so early in the morning to get everything done to get on the bus that I told my dad I just couldn't take it. It just was too much because, I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning to try to get everything done and then get on the bus at 7:30 and then ride for an hour. I'd ride the bus. Well, if I had a car, I could get to school in about 20 minutes. So I could save quite a little time, by driving. And so my dad relented, and he said, well, we'll get you a car. So my first car was a 1947 Plymouth. I bought it used, of course, and it was, I really liked that car. It was a great car.
Do you remember how much it cost?
$700.
$700.
I paid $700 for it. I remember very clearly how much it cost because I had to pay for it.
Yeah. So you got paid for doing the chores
I got
around?
paid for doing the chores. My dad paid me so much a month. I earned so much a month milking the cows. But I earned it, but he also strongly suggested what I do with my money. So in other words, it was, I'll give you this money, but then tell me what you're doing with it. Because he wanted to know how I was spending it. So I saved most of it.
How long did it take you to save that up?
Well, I had the car all paid for when I got it. I had the $700 saved when I got my car. And he wanted me to get a car that was, it was a Pontiac, and it was a year newer, and it was $1,500. And I said, I don't want to make payments. I could maybe pay $30 a month and pay for it, but I didn't want to do that. that was too expensive for me. So I said, I'll just buy this Plymouth, and it was okay, you know.
So was it a sedan, a four-door
Yeah, it was
car?
a four door. Yeah, it was four door. It was gray, and of course I doctored it up, put mud flaps on it, and fixed it up a little bit. They had plastic inserts that looked like white wall tires, and I put that on it, and he let me spend a little money on dollying it up a little bit, and had a hood or a outside visor. I don't remember what they called those that you hung on cars that stuck out in front of your windshield, so the sun didn't come in.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what they call those. I can't remember. That's a long time ago, John.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Who were your friends in high school?
Oh, I had Jerry Hilton, was my best man at my wedding, and he was my best friend in high school. He was a Milton kid, and we used to hang around all the time. And then I was friends with your dad, of course, or your grandpa, and there was other kids I can't remember now, but Jerry was certainly my best friend, you know, and we just kind of hung together most of the time. And he didn't play any sports, but he was involved, and I was also involved in the junior class play and the senior class play. Had a part, didn't have the main part, but had a part, and you know, did things like that just to be a part. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I did in high school that I just am overlooking. I can't think of anything else because I was on the photography club, but it was just all things that could be done in school.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to play football, but that meant that after school you had to practice, you know, and that just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
You know, my dad was pretty sick, and I graduated in '52. I was second in my class, and I really wanted to go on to school. They had what they called a floating scholarship, and it was given to the valedictorian. There was a gal that was the valedictorian, and she turned it down. So I was they didn't call, I don't know if they called me a salutatorian or not, but they have a valedictorian, and then they have a first and second in the class. Well, I was second in the class. We had 42 in our class, and I was second in my class, but she didn't want the scholarship, so it came down to me, and it was a scholarship to go to any college or university in the country. That's why they called it a floating one. There were a lot of scholarships given by schools to kids who wanted to go to a specific school, and they still do that, I guess. You know, if there's a certain, you know, like Northwestern College may come up, or Northwestern University, or Wisconsin, state of Wisconsin, or Whitewater, or whatever, they give you a scholarship if you go to their school. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you're good in sports, why, that got you there, you know, and you could get a kind of well, not a free ride, but close to it.
So the scholarship you're talking about, would that have covered a lot of it? A lot of school?
Oh yeah, that would have covered a lot.
Yeah.
But I talked to my dad, and he said, well, if you go to school, that means you're going to have to leave the farm, and then it's going to be hard for me. So when I graduated, I just went farming. I just didn't go on to school. I kind of wanted to go on to school. My mother wanted me to go on to school, but my dad was in such poor health that it just didn't work out that I could. So,
was there something that you specifically wanted to study if you would have went on?
No, I just thought getting a college degree would probably be a good idea. I didn't have anything specific in mind when I was going to go on to school. I mean, I hadn't chosen a field to go into because I was farming.
Yeah.
You know, so it was, and if I'd have gone to school, probably would have been an ag school, you know, because I grew up on the farm. But I just didn't really love farming like a lot of people do. A lot of people really like it, but I didn't really. It was fine. I did a good job and it got done, but it was a job and I earned money. And when I started farming, it was my dad helped me and we got going and I got started and started getting in on shares and I don't know whether you want to go into that now or not.
Sure.
But you know, I started farming on what they call thirds, where a third of the income was mine, and then my dad owned the machinery and he owned the cattle, but I'd get a third of the income for doing the work. So it was, you know, machinery, cattle, and work, and then and crops. I got a third of the crops, and so I got a third of the income from the cattle, and all the new calves that were born and grew up, I got a third of those. And eventually I worked my way up to where I had a pretty good capability to make a down payment. So I bought my dad's machinery and went on what we call halves. And that was where you worked. A lot of farmers early at the time I was farming, worked on what they called they were sharecroppers. My dad was a sharecropper for years. He worked on my grandma's farm. He worked my grandma's farm until we bought the farm that I lived most of my life on in 1941 at the time of the war. I think it was 1941. I think well, no, wait a minute. Yeah, I think we bought it in 41 and then moved to that farm in 45, right after the war. But anyway, I just kind of grew into farming, and then eventually just bought the machinery and went on shares, and that's when I, you know, and then you know, Grandma Mansur and I got married right out of high school. We graduated in June and got married in September. So we were both 18 years old.
So let's take a step back and talk about, you mentioned last time how you met her, how you saw her for the first time.
Yeah.
So you could talk about that for a second, and then what it was like dating in high school and what you went and did.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When I saw your grandma, I said, you know, I told your dad, I was sitting with him like I told you the last time, and I said I'm going to marry that girl. Well, it took me quite a few. You know, I was pretty well through my freshman year before she finally decided to get rid of her other boyfriend. She just thought that he was okay, but she had another boyfriend, and finally, I talked her out of that one, and we started dating. So we were in our freshman year when we started dating, and I think it was my sophomore year before I could drive legally, and so we had a 1947 2-ton Chevrolet truck. Had a big box on the back. That was on the farm. That was our farm truck. My dad had a 1947 Buick. Like I told you last time, he only owned 4 cars in his lifetime. And that 1947 Buick, I couldn't drive. He wouldn't allow me to drive it. Even though I was licensed to drive, he wouldn't allow me to drive it. So I took my driver's test in this 2-ton truck, and we went to Milton. I took it in Milton, and there was a policeman in Milton, just one. His name was Leon Todd, and they called him Two Gun Todd because he carried 2 guns. and he had this old Oldsmobile with a siren, one of these chrome siren. Oh, you've seen them. They look like a big headlight sitting on the fender, you know. And he drove that car. Well, I went to take my driver's test, and I remember him giving me that driver's test, and then I got my. He said, "Boy," he says, "if you can handle this great big truck," he says, I guess you can handle a car." Well, I'd been driving tractors for 10 years, and so, but I passed that fine. Well, then I would take your mother out. I'd take your grandmother out in in that 2-ton truck, and my dad would let me take that to go and get her when we started dating, and I'd take her around. But her parents had a DeSoto. That's a Chrysler product years ago. That's one of the Chrysler products that they used to have, and they called it a DeSoto after the Explorer DeSoto. And so she used to drive. Her dad would let her drive the car. Her dad would let her drive their car,
Mm-hmm.
but my dad wouldn't let me drive our car. And of course, I didn't have a car yet because I
Mhm.
didn't get that till my junior year.
So where did she live then?
She lived over on the county line, and when I first started going with her, she lived over on the county line, and that was Johnstown and Walworth County line. It was a road, and it's still called the County Line Road to this day, because it's a road that runs right along the county line, about 5-6 miles east of us, and so they lived on a farm down almost to County Trunk M, going south on County Line Road off of A. A would go down to M, and then there would be there was a farm there, and so I used to go over and get her, and we'd go to a movie with the 2-ton truck. A little hard to park in town because they weren't designed for big trucks.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of find a place. But most of the time, her dad let her take their car, so we would go on a date. Now, what we did, our biggest form of entertainment, all the way through high school, was roller skating. We'd go to Ace High Roller Rink and skate, and she was really good at it. I wasn't very good at it to start with. She had learned before me, so she taught me how to skate, and I got pretty good at skating. And we would just really enjoy going skating. So we'd go to Ace High Roller Rink.
Where is that at?
And it was here in Janesville, and it was out on West Court, out I don't know about where. Well, let's see, would it be about where the McDonald's is on the corner out there on West Court now? I think that's about where Ace High was at that time, and it was a big roller rink, and we'd go there, and oh man, did we ever have fun going there to that roller rink. And we did that probably, well, we couldn't do a lot during the week because you didn't do a lot because you didn't stay out late, on school nights. So it would have to be on the weekends. We'd go Friday night and Saturday night, Sometimes never went Sunday night because neither one of us would go on Sunday because we didn't think that was right, to do that kind of thing on Sunday. So we grew up back in the day when Sunday was kind of was a lot more respected as a day than it is now. I mean, people do anything. They save all their activities for the weekend, and then they do them on Sunday. But that wasn't the way it was back then. So we'd go on Friday night and Saturday night, and it was it was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
We had a good time.
What did her parents think of you back then?
Oh, they thought I was pretty nice.
Yeah.
Her mother thought the sun rose and set in me. She thought, as I've told people, there was one time during our courtship, I think it was in our senior year, that she decided that, she said, we've been going together all through high school. We maybe ought to go with somebody else. And I said, well, I'm okay with not doing that, but if you need that. So she had this guy that she thought she'd like to go with. So she got a date. We each had our class ring. So I gave her back her class ring, and she gave me back mine. And we said, we know we won't go steady now for a while, and we'll see. And so she went out with this guy, but I got her mother to tell me what she was going to do. And so she she and this guy had a date. And so the guy came to pick her up, but her mother let me know when he was coming, so I was up parked along the road not too far from the farm. And by then they had moved over toward Milton. They were on County Trunk KK. And they had moved over to a smaller farm over by Milton, or actually about the same size. I think it was about 200 acres. But they farmed up there. And so her mother told me that this guy was, what he would, that he was coming, take her out on a date. And I didn't know where they were going. So I just showed up a little before he picked her up and followed him. And they went to a movie at the old Beverly Theater in Janesville. And I got a ticket and sat right behind him. Now, he didn't know I was there. He didn't know I was there, but she knew I was there. So I sat right behind him to make sure that everything was kosher,
Yeah.
Everything was okay. Everything was proper. And anyway, it was funny. I shouldn't use the word kosher. It's, proper is the better word. But
So did that last long of her?
well, she went out on a Saturday night, and Monday morning, I came to school, and I approached her in the study hall, and I said, "Here's my ring." She says, "What's this for?" I says, "This isn't going to work. We might just well keep going together." And so she gave me her ring, and I gave her, and I said, she says, "Well, don't you care what I think?" And I said to her, "Well, from now on, I'll do your thinking for you." That was the only time I ever made that statement to your grandma, because that wouldn't wear well.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
In most of our married years, it did not wear well.
No.
She wanted to do her own thinking. She was pretty independent, but it was funny because she didn't disagree. She said, "Oh, well, okay, let's just keep going." So we just kept going right on through our senior year, and I gave her a ring at Christmas time in our senior year. She got her engagement ring for Christmas in our senior year, and then we graduated in June and got married in September. Then it was 3 years later before Brian came. That's my oldest. That's the oldest member of the family.
Was it common in those days for people to get engaged in high school?
Not common.
No.
But it happened. I mean, there were kids who went through high school and then they got married. I think the tendency nowadays is to get out into the world and get maybe an education of a college level, or get into business a little bit more, or get a little more advanced before you get married. But back then, there were kids that got married soon after they were 18. I mean, getting married younger was not as unusual as I think it is today. People today in society, it seems to me like they get a little older before they get married. Is a general rule. They don't get married, and it's probably wise. Because boy, I tell you, I thought I knew about marriage and love and all that, and I didn't know a thing.
Yeah.
I had to learn all that. that was a tough learn, I'll tell you.
Talking about college, was there much pressure, or was it talked about much in high school of teachers or counselors or even family members wanting people in high school then to go to college?
It wasn't emphasized as much then as it is now, because there the possibility of getting a pretty good job with a high school education existed when I was going to school. Now, you could still get passed over because for a person with a college degree in a field where maybe advanced education or some degrees back after your name was pretty important. And so but you could make it, today, and it's a little different. I mean, today the competition is a little more keen, and it really helps to have a college degree. You could see the trend through the years. I've kind of watched the trend, and the trend has been it's more important today for college than it was when I graduated, because a lot of kids, we were considered a rural school. I mean, there was as many kids came to Milton High School from the country as there was from the two towns. So, about half the kids were farm kids. So, and when you graduated, a lot of kids went farming. They went farming with their folks, or they just go back and work the family farm. And your education for that, the need for education was almost provided day by day as you grew up.
Yeah.
You grew up, you kind of grew right into it. And there's a lot of kids that follow in the footsteps of their parents today. I mean, that's pretty normal. But even so, the idea of a college degree is of some kind. Even if it's a bachelor's degree or just a lesser degree, is pretty valuable.
So talking about Grandma, what were her parents' names and what were they like?
Well, her dad's name was Rex and her mother's name was Cretia. Her mother was one of 16 kids, and so she was from the Brown family, and they were a bunch of Browns, and it was a great family. They'd get together and they'd have a lot of fun together, and so she was when they had a family get together. When I was going through high school courting Jean, I tell you what, they'd have get-togethers with the Browns, and there'd be 50, 60 people, or 70, or I mean, it was just unbelievable, because they'd all get together, and they all had kids, and so I got to know them real well. Of course, I had one sister, so I didn't have many siblings, and so it was great. And Rex, her dad, I think, had one brother, and he was killed when he was younger, so he didn't have any siblings. So it was a natural to just kind of, when all the Browns gathered, why, it was a big deal.
So did they get together for only holidays, or
oh no,
all the time?
they'd get together a lot. They'd get together a lot. Now I can remember Sunday nights out at the farm, and Crete was her mother, Jean's mother, was a really good cook. I mean, she really could put out food, and the family knew that and liked that.
Yeah.
So they would show up. So we had a lot of fun, and they were a bunch of characters, I'm going to have a coughing spell.
So, did Grandma have any brothers or sisters?
She had one brother, Larry, and he started the Addy water softener. He was a policeman for several years, and then he decided to go into business for himself, and went into the water softener business, and the Addy water softener is still going. It was a very successful business, and Larry was a good hunter, and he was a great shot. He liked to hunt, and he was he was when when I was about 25, that's when I came to know the Lord. And my wife was a Christian ahead of me. I think it's worthwhile, going into this part of my life, because this is the big part of my life. And Grandma Mansur knew the Lord before I did. She had accepted Christ, and I was not all into that. When I grew up, I went to church, but I think I told you about going to church last time. But when I'd go to church, but it didn't sink in. But I came to know the Lord on a Sunday night in February of 1959, and I was confronted by the Holy Spirit. Didn't know who the Holy Spirit was. Didn't know who Christ to speak of. I knew. You hear people using the name of Christ, so you're introduced to Christ, in all the wrong ways, And I learned that, God's last name wasn't Dammit. I learned that He was the Lord, and I came to know the Lord.
So what was that like?
Oh, it was that night, that Sunday night. Gene and I had talked Sunday afternoon about different things, and she mentioned some things that, if you do these things, you're not going to get into heaven. And I don't know why, but that thought had never really kind of sunk in. But that night when I went to do my chores, of course I was still farming then, I went to do my chores. When I entered the milk house, the Holy Spirit said, "This is the time," and He hit me, and it was the most despairing moment in my entire life. I've never forgotten it. I just felt an absolute despair for being lost. I just thought the concept of being separated completely from God forever settled right down on me. And that was just God's time. He just intervened in my life. And boy, it was miserable. I was begging Him to forgive me and crying. And it was awful. And I came to the house that night, and I opened the Word of God, and I came to the scripture in Isaiah that says, "Though your sins be as scarlet, I'll make them as white as snow." Man, I tell you, I dove into the Word, started studying, and then as I studied and continued to grow, I learned who the Holy Spirit was, and I learned what had happened to me. And it took me a long time not to get out of the despair mood, because I thought I was done for. I thought there's no hope for me, and but obviously I just grew into a relationship with the Lord, and that's almost 60 years ago. And I haven't regretted a minute of it.
So what did Grandma think of that when that happened?
Well, she was quite delighted, very frankly.
Yeah.
Because, I was a typical, if I could use profanity and tell dirty stories and do all kinds of, improper things, but that all changed when I came to know the Lord. And so it was the best, it was the worst time and the best time of my life. That's hard to understand, but that's the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was the worst thing happening. It was not pleasant happening, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so I went on from there, and we started attending the Free Methodist Church in Janesville. They had just built a church, and they built a church